Hello, everybody. Welcome inside the Fantasy Hut for a special Week 13 podcast show. I'm the League Commissioner, David Chiarsis, joined as always by League member Alex Mason. How are we doing today, Alex?
Good, David. How we doing?
Good. We got some playoff scenarios to break down for Week 13. Five teams have already clinched spots. 3 teams fighting for that last playoff spot, so it should be an exciting Week 13. We thought first, before we get to those matchups this weekend, we talk about some teams that have actually been eliminated from playoff contention. Sam D's and soon-to-be champ. Take a look at their future prospects and who their possible keepers could be. Let's start with soon-to-be champ. Alex, what are you thinking about his future prospects?
I think it's pretty simple. I think you give up on C.J. Spiller, someone he traded with me for in the offseason, helping me get Megatron. Just want to thank you for that. Brandon Marshall, Percy Harvin, Josh Gordon, actually pretty good. I think it's pretty obvious, especially with the way receivers put up points in this league.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we've learned from this season is the running back position has been such a crapshoot that, having 3 elite or relatively elite receiver keepers is probably a really good way to think about the future. Get your receiving core set, and then you can kind of tackle other positions throughout the draft. So I think those are some really good keepers for him. Looking at Sam D is a little more up in the air. I think Alfred Morris is definitely a continued keeper for him. He'll be an 8th rounder next year. He's been great this year. Just has ran into some touchdown vultures, hasn't gotten to the end zone a lot, but has been really effective. Other than that, I really don't know what he does. He's told me that Vincent Jackson's value as I think a 4th rounder next year is just a little, or actually I think a 3rd rounder is just a little too much for him. So some of his other prospects just aren't great. I mean, Andre Brown, if he continues to be the Giants' running back of the future, depending on how that works out with David Wilson, he's been great since coming back. He had Locker, but I think he's dropped him once he got hurt. He was a possibility. So, I think he's done with Eli Manning after the struggles that Manning has had. So, a lot to build on for Sam Dees, maybe a rebuilding mode for him.
I think unless he's willing to trade some picks in the offseason for a keeper, he might be. Has anyone ever not kept 3 players?
No.
I don't see 3 players worth keeping.
And actually, Jordan Cameron.
If he feels the way he does about Vincent Jackson, I'm going to say, yeah, Morris and Cameron.
Yeah, and I actually think that despite the 3rd round value, I think Vincent Jackson is somebody that I would continue to keep. He's been great this year.
Agree with you.
Yeah. So now we're going to look ahead to the playoffs. Week 13 coming up, some big games. Some spots were clinched up last week. Most notably, our 2 divisions. We'll start first in the Eastern Division. Mace's Ace is here, winning his first division crown with an exciting comeback victory over me on Monday night. Bolden and Kaepernick hooking up for 2 touchdowns to overcome, I think, a 44-point deficit to win its first division crown. Talk about, the feelings of finally getting that done and what that does for your playoff chances.
Well, first let's talk about beating you. Of course, when you take down the commissioner, it feels good. I feel like everyone should strive to knock this guy down. But yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to get you on a week where you didn't have a great week. You had a couple good performances out of 2 spots, but other than that, nothing spectacular. And Bolden and Kaepernick hooking up for the first time like this all year when I needed it most. In a week when I was struggling with some buys, had my quarterback, my boy Russell Wilson, out. So it feels great, and just winning the division. I remember telling you a couple weeks ago, I felt like I needed the division more than anyone with my Week 14 schedule. My 49ers and my Seahawks facing each other. We know that those are 2 good defenses, and it could have been some low performances. So that would have been no good come playoff time.
And I think in general, obviously, we've talked all year about how important winning that division is. To be able to sit out a week and be just 1 game away from the championship. Winning the division also guarantees that you're in a money-making game. If you lose in the semis, you're in that 3rd place game for $150. So obviously a great position to be in. Our Western Division title was clinched by the Sorge, who beat Lardarius Webb in Week 12 with another big performance. The Sorge, no matter who he puts into his lineup, seems to have a big day. Every week it seems like the Sorge has to make a decision, and he makes the right one. And I said on my website, on the website, the Power Rankings this week, he's my pick to win it all. His 3 running backs, Charles, Forte, and Murray, all great PPR guys. His 2 quarterbacks are obviously great, and now he's starting to get a little bit healthier. Crabtree's going to play this weekend, so his receiving core I think is looking a little bit better than it was maybe a couple weeks ago. So the Swords once again looking strong going into the playoffs. But once again, last year finished I think 11-2, dominated the regular season, and then lost in the second round. So once playoff time comes, anything can happen. Thoughts on the Swords? Maybe one of your possible championship opponents if you're able to both get there.
Well, I think he definitely has a good chance. He's still struggling at the wide receiver position. He's just fortunate to have, besides Calvin or Green, the best wide receiver. Coming off a down week, Antonio Brown, but he leads the league in receptions. He's the go-to guy for them.
He's been great.
He seems to be trailing and throwing the ball a lot. So yeah, I like that. But he's got really some big number guys and some guys that can be a question mark. Rafael,
I think
Austin, White.
One thing that'll be important with him is his matchups, maybe more so than some other teams. So the other two teams that clinched playoff spots last week were Balsa Hardew and RG Three-Way. They will play in a first-round game, just a matter of who will be the 4 seed, who will be the 5 seed. So those two are going to meet. They split both meetings this season, so it should be an interesting matchup. Both teams have been strong all season. RG Three-Way's lineup's looking fierce once again. Thoughts on this first-round matchup?
Well, I like Heath with Drew Brees. He seems to be the most productive player. Everyone wanted to get on Peyton Manning in the beginning after the huge 70-point game, but Drew Brees has outscored him or been just as productive every single week since then. Reggie Bush, another good acquisition. Wes Welker seems to become hit and miss lately. That would concern me. And then if I were to say something about RG Three-Way, fearsome running back core, but coming down the stretch, 3 of them are on serious playoff contenders. I wonder if they get their snaps limited. Shortening their production.
Yep. And Gore, he had that string, I think 5 straight games where he was over 100 yards or had scored, and he's kind of slowed down of late. Something that RG3 owner Pat's talked to me about is his concerns over Robert Griffin III, who's not really playing well. Kind of the games that he's been good in fantasy-wise is games they've trailed, and he's kind of gotten a lot of garbage time points, so that's something to keep an eye on. Our other playoff team that's clinched a spot is Ladarius Webb. That team will meet our number 6 seed that gets into the playoffs. Thoughts on Ladarius Webb after the 5-0 start? Has kind of been up and down a little bit of late. A lot rides on Peyton Manning, obviously. So just thoughts on Ladarius Webb and his playoff chances.
Yeah, it's all about Peyton Manning, as you can see behind me. He's got some question marks for sure. James Jones and Burleson. Burleson getting him a donut this week. Second quarterback is a huge question mark. Rookie E.J. Manuel in his lineup right now. Ryan Tannehill is his other option, who's also been hit or miss this year. He's really, really, I said about another previous team, but he, more than anyone, needs 2 players to go off. Otherwise, he really has no shot of winning. Sproles has been banged up. His production is not what it was. Woodhead benefited from Ryan Matthews leaving last week.
Yeah.
Obviously still a PPR monster, but I don't know. I'd be concerned if I was this team. He's fortunate that he's going to get one of the 2 lesser wild card teams, and either you or Joe.
Or Kamali, yeah. I think one thing definitely to look for is if anybody saw the hit that Le'Veon Bell took on Thursday night, obviously he has a little bit more time to recover from what obviously was a concussion. How he bounces back, and if he's cleared for next week will be important to watch for Ladarius Webb. So that brings us to our 3 big Week 13 games that will decide our last playoff spot. 40s, D-Butters, and Kamoli all in contention with different scenarios to get them in. 40s in the driver's seat. If he wins, he's in. One thing I actually realized that I didn't touch on my playoff push article this week is I trail 40s by 55 points, which initially would have seemed like an insurmountable point difference, but given the way that Thursday played out, not so impossible anymore. But if we take that out of the equation, 40s, win and you're in. D-Butters, myself, I need a win and a loss by 40s. Kamoli needs losses by both of us and a win and overcome a 12-point differential from 40s. So 40s, we'll talk about him first. Was 2-7, has won 3 in a row, looking to make its 4th straight playoff appearance, has been to 3 straight title games. Every time we get to this point of the season, it seems like 40s is right there knocking on the door, playing obviously a tough opponent this week, RG Three-Way. Thoughts on that matchup?
Yeah, seriously, this guy just won't go away. He just never does. his team is really rounded into form and got an unfortunate bagel from Jared Boykin. Who, that team couldn't move the ball. Boykin had been very productive. He'd been seeing targets. He'd been averaging, I think, 4 to 5 receptions a game. Just been, backup quarterback after backup quarterback hurt him there. But as far as his matchup is concerned, just as fortunate, that 0 is negated by Jordy Nelson's 3.4. So 2 guys in the same game kind of got dependent on who's going to get the more targets. So I guess in this case, fortunate that neither of them saw any targets.
So that's obviously the first big matchup. The second is myself against soon-to-be champ. I was 1-4, 2-5. Have battled back. Thought I was going to be in a great position to beat Mace's Aces last week. Came up a little bit short, so now I need some help this week. But I got some great performances on Thursday night. 19 from Dez, 19 from Sanders, and 17 from Rashad Jennings. So I'm in a good position. Soon to be champ, although is in last place, has some guys that some explosive players. So it's not a sure thing by any means. But I like my start and my position I'm in so far.
Yeah, I agree. No huge games, but some good chunks, good performances. I mean,
they all scored
basically 20 points from every guy, playing what I think is a far inferior opponent. So I like you're going to hold up your end of the bargain in terms of your playoff push. You have to win and then wait and see what happens. And I think you got this actually.
And I think one of the huge keys for me. Kind of a minor deal for the Swords, but a big deal for me was trading Joseph Randall and Kobe Fleener to the Swords for Kendall Wright the week of the trade deadline. Kendall Wright's been great for me, even when he hasn't scored. He scored his first touchdown of the year last week, but he's been great in our PPR format. Been a huge pickup for me. And then Kamoli, our last team we're looking at, he's playing Ladarius Webb this week. Kamoli at 4-8, the other 2 teams at 5-7. So once again, it needs losses by both and overcome a 12-point differential from 40s. Kamoli got 14 from Romo and 4 from the Pittsburgh defense. Some mixed results for Ladarius Webb on Thursday. Thoughts on this matchup? Any chance that Kamoli gets into the playoffs?
No. It's pretty simple. First of all, you're dependent on 5 guys on one team. What is it, worked out once all year?
Yeah.
Where they all went off. I think we all learned a valuable lesson, and most of us, 9 out of 10 of the league, probably already knew. But we were just waiting for that, that slow kid in the class to catch on and figure out you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Unless that miracle 1 in, I guess it's 1 in 12 success rate. If he's banking on that to happen and get 120 points out of 5 players, then he might have a chance. But no, not going to happen. Peyton, I think he's going to be on the warpath. All the receivers are going to have big games. If you have a Denver offensive player this week, other than Noshawn Moreno, unfortunately, he might not even play. I don't really see a reason for them to play him. It is a big game, but the backup running backs have proven, you could split the work between them, and they can still. Peyton Manning doesn't really need to throw to give them the ball to win.
Yeah.
He just does it because it's been very effective with Moreno. So Peyton's going to be. He's going to put up some serious points for Kevin. We'll see if Decker catches a touchdown. So I like Kevin.
I think Kamoli's roster with his 5 Patriots speaks to kind of the struggle that some people have with fantasy sports is keeping fantasy separate from real life. That I know people that won't draft or won't roster a player simply because he's on the team that they hate, which you got to keep them separate. You got to understand, which players are valuable, and having 5 guys on one team just doesn't give you a good percentage. Your odds are not in your favor that all those guys are going to perform as well as guys spread out over other teams. Once again, it's only worked out once. The Patriots haven't been the offense that they've been, and they've kind of struggled. They're always going to be dependent. Kamoli's always going to be dependent on what those guys do. Playing Houston, who's obviously haven't struggling through a tough season, but they have a good defense, and we'll see. I mean, I love Shane Vereen. Gronk's obviously a beast. But Ridley's had some fumbling issues. I don't even think he should be in Kamoli's lineup.
Nope,
and Amendola just hasn't been the Wes Welker that we maybe thought he was going to be. I agree. Since I made my big trade, I've been picking everybody to beat me. This is the one week that I'm picking myself to win. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me.
Have you been right the other 2 times?
Well, no.
Yourself to lose?
Most of the time, but I've won a couple games. So we'll see. if there's one team I wouldn't want to be going up against, it's Joe and 40s. Just because, it is fantasy, and we talk about getting it done and finding ways to win, somehow he does. So, it'll be interesting to watch. It'll be fun to watch. There'll be a lot of fantasy-relevant players in Monday night's game in Seattle and New Orleans. So we'll see if some of those games come down to that Monday night game. Should be interesting, and then we'll be back next week to break down the playoffs. Hopefully, we get our playoff teams on the show. That'll be fun to get a little smack talk going, and we'll soon be crowning our 9th champion, which will obviously be exciting. And me and Mason will be here throughout the playoffs to discuss all that. So we hope you'll join us once again on the Fantasy Hut, and good luck to everybody in Week 13.